Hi BookTube. It's Sina and this is Beating Around the Books. And I would like to do the first attempt at a mid-month wrap-up, and it just so happens to be Friday as well, so I guess it can also count as a Friday reads if one chooses. You see me in a different background. Sorry, it looks a bit weird, but my husband's doing Zoom conferences in the lounge, so this is the only other room in this house. Anyway, sorry if the camera wobbles a bit because you are propped up on the bed. Anyway, all the books I finished in the first half of the month were audiobooks because apparently little old me couldn't properly read physical books because I was so tired most of the time that, yeah, I could just about read my buddy reads in their, slower pace. I finished 6 audiobooks. I think they were all on script. No, not all of them, but most of them. 2 of them were German. So the first one is a German one. It's Jenny Erpenbeck's Tage, Abend, which has also been translated into English. The title in English is The End of Days. Was my first Jenny Erpenbeck. I'd heard about her quite often already. I'm not so abreast of contemporary German literature. This is an understatement. I don't know anything really, apart from the few things that I kind of catch here or there on Instagram, because I do follow a few German ones there. But anyway, I had heard of her. I already have a physical copy of one of her books here that I found in Oxfam, but I haven't read it yet. And this one I just sort of spontaneously decided to listen to because my library had it as a, what is it called? Not an e-copy. Well, yeah, an audiobook that I could access through the app. And I was very, very taken with it. It is a novel that sort of charts the lives or the life of its protagonist and the lives of other people that touch her life through, I would say, the beginning of the 20th century all the way to after the reunification of Germany. And it has this sort of similar conceit to Kate Atkinson's Life After Life, if you've read that. So we have like 5 different parts of the book, and in each of them, well, the first one starts with a very, very heartbreaking rendering of the loss of a baby girl who dies, and the way that sort of fractures the marriage that was already fraught, because this was the one thing that kind of kept them together. And then the next rendition, in the second one, we get an intermezzo in between the 5, and in the intermezzo, Erpenbeck basically talks about what if, the mother had thought to do X, Y, and Z, and then the baby would have been able to catch her breath again, and then she would have lived, and blah blah blah. And then the second part, and then the next part begins, and there we see, okay, now this person, this baby has survived and grows up, and other terrible things might happen to her. This is an incredibly sad book. These 5 parts are quite different in style sometimes, although I feel like they're all, not all of them, but they tend to be slightly detached in the writing style, even though I still felt very touched by a lot of the scenarios she describes. And I initially gave it 4 stars, but upon longer reflection, I decided it was a 5-star book. the what else is important to say. So the actual family that whose life is being sort of followed, I guess, or lives are being followed, is I think it starts somewhere in, oh god, where was it? Oh no, I've forgotten now. Well, it's somewhere in Middle or Eastern Europe. The mother in question, the first story, is a Jewish woman, and the father is Christian, which at the time was quite unusual, and leaves a lasting, how do you say this, taint on his reputation, which is why he cannot succeed in in his job. He can't get a promotion and stuff like that, so that's already difficult. And we later learn how this marriage came about, and what reasons the grandmother, or the mother of the Jewish woman who is married to that Christian guy, what her reasons for doing this, for wanting her to marry a non-Jewish person. Well, how do you call them? Is it goy? Yes, I think so. Anyway, and it's all very, very tragic, and quite, like, how do you say this? In German, you would say harter Tobak, oder harte Kost. Well, yeah, it's hard to take sometimes. It seems like Jenny Erpenbeck does not let up in terms of the suffering that these characters have to endure, but it doesn't feel gratuitous to me at all. And I think why I ended up giving it 5 stars instead of 4 was that Life After Life for me was a 5-star book. But I feel like if I compare the two in terms of the conceit and also the way these books move through history and how these sort of, I guess, important milestones in history are rendered, I think this one is much more successful and accomplished. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. We see that, sort of, like I said, beginning of 20th century, and then there's the First World War. At some point we're in Vienna, and then people are starving, and later on we see the daughter, who's then grown up, in trying to get how do you say this, trying to get a passport for the Soviet Union, but she's also in danger of she's probably been denounced, and she's basically just writing these letters and trying to explain herself, and trying to, how do you say this, renounce any sort of connections she may have to people who have already fallen from grace. And that part, this is the third part, sometimes feels like it drags a little bit, but at the same time I thought it was really well done in terms of depicting this sort of crazy what is the word in English? In German is Denunziantentum. The way that this sort of denouncing of your friends and your comrades and so on, how that was fostered, and people, sometimes even preemptively did so because they were afraid of themselves, getting into trouble and, endangering their lives, and the sort of paranoia that entails. And I thought that was really well done. But I did think it was, in terms of just the reading experience or the listening experience, in my case, it was the weakest part, I think. Yeah, and then later we see them in the GDR. And then the last one is incredibly moving again, because then we see her as a very old woman in a care home, who has Alzheimer's, and that's, yeah, incredibly moving as well. So I can definitely recommend it, and it is translated. So if you do not shy away from very sad books, have a look at it. I can't believe I've been talking for over almost 10 minutes on one book. This is not bode well. Okay. Then after that, I listened to Rachel Cusk's A Life's Work on Becoming a Mother. I have not read any of her fiction. Obviously, she's quite all over the place, not all over the place, all over YouTube and Instagram. Seem to be a lot of women of my age who are really taken with her work. I haven't ventured into it yet, but this I don't know, this was just intriguing because she wrote it, I think, was it in 2001, or it was published in 2001, and at the time she got so much hate from both from the press, but also from a lot of mothers, because this memoir basically charts her pregnancy and sort of roughly the first year after giving birth, and she is quite honest about the parts of motherhood that she doesn't enjoy, the loss of freedom and self-determination, I guess, the incredible responsibility placed upon her, and also the way how she feels like she is not allowed to express any of those things at the time, because the role of the mother has been defined in such a sort of romanticized way by society, and most mothers also tend to play into that image, be that if they actually feel like that, or whether they are also feeling pressured to never talk about the negative sides of motherhood, especially of a very young, of a newborn. And I thought this was really, really refreshing. It's not like I've read that many things on motherhood. Well, a few, but she's the candor that she writes with, I think, is quite brave and, like I said, refreshing and I mean, I'm not a mother, but I'm of that age where quite a few of my friends have children, and have very, very young children as well. I mean, I'm glad to say that my friends, or some of them anyway, tend to be quite honest about this. Like, they might not talk about it in such detail as this memoir does, but the stuff I hear from people, I'm quite happy to see that. Not happy, how do you say that? I don't know. It's just reassuring in the sense that, it's not all just Friede, Freude, Eierkuchen. I don't know how you say that. It's not all fun and games, right? I thought this was really good. I think I gave it 4 stars. She reflects on the way how this has changed her as a person in her identity, because I can't quote it now, but she speaks about, like, as a mother, like, she has this sort of conflict within her, because to be a good mother, she must put aside any of her own needs to attend to the immediate needs of this baby. But in order to be herself, she must, like, leave the baby to cry a bit longer so she can finish this and that and the other and and both of those things are painful. Anyway, it was good, I thought. Maybe at times slightly too negative, it feels, but on the other hand, I guess a nice sort of counterweight to the I don't know, elephants and balloons type of motherhood books that I have not read, but I assume are quite ubiquitous. Then the next one I listened to is another German one, which I'm sure is not translated and probably will never be translated because it's too specific to Germany and probably there's not a lot of money to be made from it. It's Max Czollek's Desintegriert euch. So deintegrate yourselves would be my or disintegrate. No, not disintegrate. Deintegrate yourselves, I think. It's a polemic. Max Czollek is well, not now, but I think at the time he was like 30-year-old Jewish writer, Jewish German writer, and yeah, I talked about it in my last video. He basically speaks, or he criticizes the German way of how we how our society goes about almost performatively dealing with our past. I'm talking the Holocaust, and how we have changed it from this sort of acknowledgement of guilt to more, sort of identifying with the grief of the victims of the Holocaust. This is difficult to put into very few words. He advocates against a German leading culture, which a lot of politicians keep sort of proclaiming that that migrants should be adhering to and integrating into, because he believes that is, I guess, almost counterfactual. This does not portray the diverse country that Germany is now, and he sort of rejects this notion altogether, that there is such a thing as a shared culture, that even those who are not migrants, and also where do you draw the line? That's the next question, of course, would all share. And this is where that title comes from, Deintegrate Yourself. So it's like a call to action for, first and foremost, Jewish Germans. How do you say it? Or German Jews? I don't know how you say that in English. But also other minority groups, including Muslims. He talks a lot about also Islamophobia, and other marginalized groups. So I guess that's all, because this is going on too long. I gave it 4 stars. I feel like it may be a 5-star read upon a proper reread, because I think there were some passages that kind of went over my head, where he talked about the role of art in this sort of term of as a form of protest, and I got sort of the gist, but I think the diction didn't lend itself very well to an audiobook. So I think if I bought it and read it properly and gave it the time that it needs, maybe it'd be a 5-star read. Then the next one was Patti Smith's Just Kids. This was a very spontaneous decision. I found it on Scribd, and I had planned to read M Train as a buddy read with Bert from Story Time. We have started it, although I haven't made a lot of headway yet. And even though I've always heard that you can kind of read all of her memoirs kind of in whatever order and sort of as a standalone, I saw this and I thought, oh, why not? Let's give it a try. Because I'd also seen someone else, I think it was Wiebke from One Book, One Review, mention how much she enjoyed listening to the memoir because it's narrated by her, and she's got this really raspy voice that has a lot of character. Sorry for the background noises, that's my cat. I'm sure you can tell this happens all the time. What can I say? I mean, this is a very well-known book. It's 10 years old. She describes her, herself and Robert Mapplethorpe's early years as young kids who are poor, with artistic ambitions in New York. It was at times really moving, and lyrical, and at times it was slightly frustrating because it's very listy. I don't know who cares about these things, but I do not care to know what everybody was wearing and how they cut their hair and whether they had a grilled cheese sandwich or whether they had a hot dog and sauerkraut or 2 hot dogs because for once they had enough money for 2. I mean, okay, so the enough money part, at least, that illustrates the level of poverty that they lived in at the time. But, it was very listy. And in a similar way, when she speaks about her time in in the Hotel Chelsea, well, it's obviously fascinating to hear about all these, sort of iconic names, going in and out of that hotel. And, how she just brushes up against all of these people, like Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, I don't know, William S. Burroughs, and all sorts of other people who I've now forgotten. It's very name droppy, isn't it? And it doesn't, I mean, I'm not saying it feels like she's like trying to boast or anything like that, but at some point, yeah, I didn't love it entirely. I think the best part of this is probably this sort of incredible naivety with which she kind of, arrives there without any plan and no idea where she's going to live and stuff, and how she describes that, even though I find it baffling, but I like that part. And then the other, towards the other end of the book, the end part where Robert Mapplethorpe is diagnosed with AIDS, and that part is rendered incredibly moving and touching, and there it just feels a lot more raw and close up in terms, emotionally speaking, whereas before, in the parts before that, sometimes it felt quite removed because of all this listiness. Does that make sense? Yeah. So for me, it was like 3.5 stars rounded up. But I'm still reading M Train because, well, I have the copy and I want to see what, the next part entails. Then I listened to Passing by Nella Larson. This book probably also needs no introduction. This is about 2 Black women who are both quite light-skinned in the sense that they actually could pass for white, and one of them has decided to do so, and she has for years and years and years not had any contact with the other person who has decided to stay within her community and even marry a guy who has, darker skin and blah, blah, blah. This is the book that was inspiration for the much spoken about The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett, which I haven't read. And, it's a short little thing. It's 160 pages according to Goodreads. I can't remember how long the audio book is, but yeah, I think I listened to it in one day. And it was quite good. In the beginning, it was a slow start for me. I couldn't quite immediately get into it, but I ended up really enjoying it quite a lot, and I am surprised that the ending has not been spoiled by everything that I've heard about, this book previously on BookTube, and so I shall not be spoiling it either. Sorry, I'm back. I had run out of space storage on the phone. Anyway, so where were we? We were at, I think we were talking about Nella Larson passing. But I think I was done speaking about it. I gave it 4 stars. Cool. And then the last book I have just finished is Parakeet by, what is her name? Marie-Helene Bertino? I don't quite know how to pronounce that name. Helen? But it has an E at the end. Anyway, this was on, I saw this first on Matthew Sharappa's channel. He had it named as the best novel that he read in 2020, I think. I think he did an individual review, but I think I saw it in one of those, like, top 10 reads of the year videos or something. And I noted it down then, and somehow it took me almost another whole year to finally get to it. This is incredibly weird in the beginning, or well, actually weird throughout mostly. How do you begin here? Okay, let's start. What are we talking about? So the protagonist is a bride to be. Is it a bride to be or bride? Yeah, bride. In her wedding week, who is staying at the inn at which she will be celebrating where there's going to be the reception and whatever. And she's staying there for a week. Her husband isn't there because he's busy with, well, not husband, the groom is not there. He's busy with work. And she's supposed to relax there, blah, blah, blah. But of course, she also is trying to do all sorts of last minute stuff before the wedding. And we start off with a parakeet landing or appearing in her hotel room. It's a talking parakeet, and she immediately knows that this is her grandmother who has come to her in this shape, her late grandmother. And the parakeet asks her, what is the internet? And she struggles to describe it, and she speaks about how this was a question the grandmother had asked her when she was still alive, and she basically refused to answer it by telling her some lie about how that's just a phase and not to worry about it or something. And she tries to explain it, but struggles to. And then the parakeet grandmother basically gives her she requests, or she asks her that she must go and find her brother, her estranged brother, whom she has not had neither her nor the rest of the family had any contact with him for several years. For one, is because he was a drug addict, a heroin addict, and then the other reason is that he wrote a play based on this bride's traumatic experience of being attacked with a knife in her workplace way back when. And yeah, she feels like she's been, her trauma has been exploited, and she feels betrayed by that. So she obviously doesn't want to, but her grandmother, in the shape of a parakeet, insists that it's really, really important she does so, but also tells her, but you won't find him, but you still have to go and try to find him. So quite mysterious. And then, and then the parakeet shits all over her wedding dress. Yeah. So that's super weird, but for some reason it works. And we see her sort of, in these sort of mundane situations of, going to, well, it's not actually mundane. She goes to work because she has to, there's one last client she has to go to. Her work as she is documenting the memories of people who've had brain damage in some sort of accident for for courts, so you know, for a law firm, I guess, so that they can try and get more money out of whatever, you know, insurance or whoever they're suing. And she goes and visits this client, and that's quite sad, because he has short-term memory loss, and he can barely function, and you know, his relationship is completely messed up because of it, and he can't really connect to his wife anymore, and he tries really hard to, like, you know, keep chatting to this protagonist, probably because she's the only, I guess, you know, social contact that he has most of the time. And yeah, so this is, you know, I guess one man trying to find some sort of connection that, you know, has been lost to him. And then we see a scene of her speaking to her best friend from childhood, who is rather, well, who is kind of, you know, how do you say this? You know, they've grown a bit apart from each other. And you can see that she keeps trying to sort of go back to the closeness and the easy closeness of this sort of young friendship that they used to have, which isn't there anymore. So again, sort of, you know, trying to find some connection, but kind of failing at it. Then there are some rather surreal moments where you're not sure whether this is a dream or a memory, or whether this is actually real. I mean, some of it you're pretty sure it's not real, but then certain things that happen are then acknowledged by other characters, and you wonder what on earth is going on now. Well, is that must be a dream, right? And da da da. So it's a little bit disorientating, but I think it works really well if you sort of, you know, how do you say this? If you kind of suspend disbelief and just go with it. And you kind of learn about her trauma over time, you know, this knife attack thing. I mean, I don't think it's a massive spoiler. I think it's quite early on, actually. But and you can see that, you know, she seems to be quite used to having these sort of moments of uncertainty about what's real and what isn't. And it all seems, you know, tied to this trauma that she's experienced years ago, and that she hasn't been able to properly process. Yeah, and she is sort of wondering whether she should actually get married to this guy, and, you know, realizing along the way certain things that she'd kind of made herself believe, I guess, that aren't actually true. It's really well done, but it gets a little bit tiresome towards sort of within the second half, I think. I feel like some of those slightly surreal moments at that point could have really been a bit shorter. And yeah, what can I say? I'm not mad that I read it. I thought it was quite, how do you say this, like, exceptional in the way it goes about speaking about connection or the lack thereof, and to be inside this rather, I guess, unreliable narrator's head. But maybe it could have done with a bit of an edit, a bit of a tighter edit. So I was veering between 4 and 5 stars, and ultimately I decided it's 4, maybe 4.5. But yeah, that is my mid-month wrap-up. And I think I'm not going to talk about what I'm reading right now, because this video is already way too long. I feel like maybe this is giving me an idea that mid-month also doesn't work. Maybe I should really do a weekly thing. But we'll see. we'll see how this looks in the editing process. Anyway, let me know what you think of these books, if you've read any of them or if you would like to read any of them. I feel like I really need to, like, how do you say this? Promote that German one by Jenny Erpenbeck. I thought it was really good. And it's probably one of the, lesser known ones. Not lesser known specifically, generally, but among the sort of English speaking booktube peeps that are watching me, I guess. I don't know. Or if you're German, go and have a look at the German one. The audiobook is narrated by her. Some people say that they didn't like her voice, that it was a bit monotonous, but I thought it worked really well for the tone of this novel. So have a look, maybe your library has it. Again, this was obviously towards the German people. But anyway, I would love to hear if you have any thoughts on these and what you're reading at the moment. Okay, have a good day, and I'll speak to you later.